Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
And welcome back, everyone. I've had recently friends say to me that they were thinking about writing a book, and quite honestly, they don't even know where to start. Start with a publishing company that you can trust and somebody that's going to walk that journey with you. And we've got him today, and also somebody he's walked the journey with, and we're going to dig into a very, very interesting book, starting with Mark Pogodzinski from NFB Publishing, upstate New York. Hey, Mark, how you doing today?
Good. How are you?
Really good, really good. I don't know what it is. People have the passion for reading a book is all new. I don't know what's going on here. What inspired that? I saw somebody recently reading a book and they couldn't have been more than 22, like physically holding a book, which blows my mind because you can read so many things online. Any thoughts on what with the research? I know the 90s are back. What's going on there? What do you think?
Well, the 90s should be back, honestly.
I agree.
I think people are just overwhelmed with what's on TV, with streaming services and everything. And then a book is personal. When you read a book, it's your own thoughts, it's your own voice in your head. So I think people like that, because it is a personal choice, and you can put a book down, and you're not being forced. You're not being shown all the time, and you have to do some of the work, and the imagination is part of the process. And I think that's what a lot of people are drawn to.
Well, whether they're reading it online or physically and personally, I have apps to read them online, and even the audio version of them. I don't even do them. I'd rather hold a book. There's just something about it. I don't know, maybe it's old school. So who do we have joining us today?
So we have an author, Eric Jackson-Forsberg, who wrote a novel called The Spiral, which I think of all the books that I've helped people publish is one of the most interesting plot lines, because it is so wild. We have a Frank Lloyd Wright reference, and then we delve into some pretty intense physics and metaphysics. And I think is as I said, one of the most interesting plot lines that I've ever come across.
Very, very unique. Let's dig in. Eric, welcome. How are you doing today?
Good. I'm great. Happy to be here.
Before we even go into the book itself, the character, and what takes place, I'm going to go chicken before the egg. I'm going to the beginning here. What inspired you to write this type of book?
Well, they say, the conventional wisdom is to write what you know. So I had the amazing experience of being the curator for a Frank Lloyd Wright complex in Buffalo, the Martin House complex, for 9 years. So it was such an unforgettable experience, and there was so much to unpack there that I felt I needed a creative way to sort of unpack some of that experience. I did a good deal of writing in the course of that in the course of that work, but it was scholarly writing, So I started to get that itch to put it into a fictional form.
How would you describe Frank Lloyd Wright? If you could have put it into a sentence, a few words, what did he mean to you?
Well, in the context of the book in particular, it's transcendental. I mean, he was a transcendentalist. He was his family was sort of radical Welsh Unitarians, and he channeled a lot of that, along with many, many other things, into his concept of organic architecture. So it's a concept that maybe didn't transform the world of architecture and America itself in the way that he had wanted, but it has some real staying power. The concepts behind his work really are the reason that people are still interested in him today. He died in 1959, but he's still a brand, if you will.
Tell us about the character Holden in the book.
Highly autobiographical, inspired. So, it's about a curator. So it's based on that experience. a lot of other factors from my childhood and growing up in a small town as a member of Gen X who had a good deal of freedom to explore and to invent mystery around a lot of aspects of that upbringing. And he's a character who, I mean, where it gets sort of beyond my own experiences, being sort of haunted by the pursuit of knowledge, the pursuit of truth, having that become an obsession and one that gets him into some trouble and takes him down some very strange dark alleys.
Just some of the themes in this book, the pieces of glass that reveal a lot. Where did that inspiration come up?
So that's pretty directly related to my work at the Martin House. A lot of what I was doing was researching the many pieces of the house that had gone astray over its sort of checkered history. The family and the house fell on hard times. A lot of that art glass, there was like 390 something pieces of glass from the house. Some were destroyed, some were, ended up in fragmentary condition. A lot of them ended up in museum collections all over the world. So a lot of what I was doing was researching those and the right design furnishings from the house and sort of reassembling a collection that once existed. And that kind of gets to that sort of all-consuming sort of mystery around a research process. Um, and there's such iconic right designs, particularly the Tree of Life window. I mean, if there's one piece of right glass in a collection, whether it's in Scotland or Australia or wherever it may be, it's usually a Tree of Life window. It's a very iconic right design. So part of what I was doing was like feeling like I'm never going to ultimately sort of be able to do all of the research to get to the ultimate truth of why this is so popular, why this is so emblematic of Frank Lloyd Wright. So I took that in a direction of like, well, what if these objects actually had some sort of loosely science-based supernatural powers? And it goes from there.
Without giving up too much about the book, where do we go? I know the solar system plays a part in this book. Brooklyn Bridge as well. Any other places that you can tell us where we got transported?
Yeah, there's multiple timelines, and I was often kicking myself for trying to grapple with all of them. I did a good deal of storyboarding just to try to sort out how those timelines intersected and a lot of cause and effect issues. But uh,
Mm.
a lot of some of it is what's the term? Epistolary, in the form of letters and texts and emails and so on, going back to the prehistory of the main narrative, which is Holden's story and the road trip that goes from Buffalo to New York City. But in with that, interweaving with that, are timelines of going all the way back to the late 19th century. Again, maybe not giving too much away, but the materials in this art glass play a role in the uh, otherworldly source of those materials. How two identical pieces of glass um, find their way around to different owners and different conditions, and ultimately make their way back into Holden's orbit and turn out to be some pretty far out devices, if you will.
The book is very unique in that way. What inspires you? Like if you're going to sit down and read something or watch something, a movie, a show, whatever it might be, what would it be?
Well, I'm a big fan of genres like sci-fi, fantasy, and historical fiction, but I think what's really exciting about books, also in music and and film and TV these days is that there's a lot of cross-pollination between those. So I don't know if if that's one of the main drivers for this novel, but I just sort of gravitated towards that combination of genres. So, whether it's jazz metal or horror comedy or whatever it might be, there's a lot of hybrid genres these days, and I think they're really compelling and they're popular for a reason. So I like media that combines genres like that. And on that note, there's actually precedent for rights, buildings, and designs being used in science fiction films. In Blade Runner and Gattaca, they're Wright buildings or facsimiles of Wright buildings that are used for those. And I think that gets back to that sort of transcendental quality of his architecture that sort of lends itself to kind of a futuristic application.
Did I hear you say jazz
Yeah,
metal?
yeah, jazz metal. Yeah.
That one's off my radar. I will say though, last night I was laying in bed. I got in the habit of listening to music and lyrics, and I came across an album that I had when I was a kid. Like, your parents put them aside. You're like, what's this? Guy's name is David Axelrod. I go looking a little bit deeper, and like 1967, he was responsible for fusion jazz. I always heard that term, never knew what it was, and now I'm listening to it. I was like, oh, it's actually ahead of his time. But the jazz metal or metal jazz, I definitely got to look into that. It sounds very interesting.
Sounds weird, but sometimes it works.
Yeah. Mark, when you got this book, you've already revealed that it was unlike anything you've ever seen before in your history as a publisher. Well, what were your first thoughts?
When Eric talks about it, the amount of planning that goes into a fiction book like this, storyboarding, you have multiple plot lines. And I know a lot of people think that you can just sit down and write fiction and whatever is in your head you can put down on paper, but it takes a lot of effort and a lot of discipline to create something worthwhile. And you could see when writing all the different influences, the transcendentalism, the sci-fi, and then what I actually like about it is it's rooted in reality. So you have the Frank Lloyd Wright, you have the Glass, you have his art, and it expands from there. And then world building, you build out from this reality into something wonderful, into something new, into something magical. And so I thought all those combinations rolled into one, produced a really, really interesting fiction book. And that's what really drew me to it. Having been raised in this area, Frank Lloyd Wright was in Western New York. There's a couple different parts of Western New York that are devoted to him, and he's always been, an important part of the art movement here in Western New York. And so I like that too. So he had the hometown roots. You had this magical fictional plot line that starred with reality, and I thought that was really outstanding.
We've talked about the importance of editing a book and how an author should never do it because you can't see certain things. For the editing of this book, so unique fiction, based on a little bit of history because of the what we're talking about here. But how do you edit something like that?
Well, for this book, we really had to trust Eric. Since he was the expert on it, he had background with Frank Lloyd Wright, and he was very good about saying what he wanted, like what had to be in there, how, as he said, the text and letters had to be presented to move the plot forward. So Eric did most of the work, and as we say, author, it's difficult to edit your own work. We always have someone look at it. With this work, you want to make sure that a layperson who reads the book can understand it, can follow it.
Yep.
Even if they have no idea who Frank Lloyd Wright is and all these different aspects that he brings in. So the beta reader was also important in that respect too, because they could tell us what needed to be flushed out, what needed to be explained. And Eric did a fantastic job with that.
Which I find unique too. There's chapters and they have certain names: open house, back matter, lessons and carols 1, unpacking, Mrs. Robertson and Madame Blavatsky. I'm not even sure if I'm saying
Blavatsky.
Hey,
Yeah.
why were there different chapters? Why did you decide to build it into different chapters? And could you pick one, be it Ascension, that's chapter 14, um, without giving it up? What's actually transpiring? Why did we build it that way?
Yeah, so I think I always picture the chapters as having somewhat evocative titles because I'm trying to weave so much into this story. Um, I'm not sure if it was necessary, but I just it helped me to set the scene and kind of paint the picture of each episode. And it is a story that unfolds episodically. And I tried to take some
Hmm.
inspiration. It's funny. Somebody who read a fairly early draft said they thought it was kind of a page turner, like a Dan Brown novel. There's a sort of mini cliffhanger at the end of each chapter. I was amazed to hear that because I mean, given the subject matter and the complexity, I never expected it to have that sort of appeal. But so I guess the chapter titles aren't crucial, but that's just the way I envisioned it from the start with all the various pieces that I was trying to knit together here.
Well, I find it interesting that you call it episodes instead of chapters. Uh,
Mhm.
Kind of speaks a volume right there. Working on another book?
At not at the moment. I mean, a lot of people are asking me that. This was enough of a challenge that I'm enjoying taking a little break, but it certainly isn't something that I would rule out.
Is
Haven't put the
the
start on it yet, but
Do you have some ideas circulating in your mind right now?
I think that this universe certainly could continue or expand. I have a notebook full of ideas for short stories, and I'm thinking maybe I go back to that and tackle something a little more manageable in that regard.
Hmm.
But
Interesting. We've talked about short stories here before and how they're having a comeback and poems too.
I wanted to add a little something to the editing thing, if I may go
Please.
back to that. Well, one thing I wanted to mention before editing is this book started almost 10 years ago with something called the National Novel Writing Month, and I wanted to sort of plug that, even though unfortunately it doesn't exist anymore, but it did for a number of years. And that was an organization with a website that did an annual challenge in November to write 40,000 words in the month of November. And I was working as a copywriter at the time, and a creative colleague of mine challenged me to do that. So I had some of these pieces of this story rattling around in my head at that point, but that was a really great structured way um, to get that first draft down,
Wow.
which I think was the hardest part. I don't know if I quite hit that word count mark, but the website was great. It had a tracker, so you could kind of divide it up by days and by weeks, and hit your goal. So it was kind of gamifying that process. And I honestly don't know if I ever would have created it if it wasn't for that to get to that first draft. Now, that first draft bears little resemblance to how it ended up, countless revisions from there. But the one thing I wanted to say about editing is that I was really fortunate to have a small handful of uh, friendly but critical readers to read some of those early and admittedly ill-formed drafts and give me some great direction to get it into shape eventually. So I'm really thankful those people are in the acknowledgments, and I'm really grateful to them
Wow.
for that help.
For the rest of us, 40,000 words, it's hard to put it into perspective. So approximately how many words are in the total novel?
Oh, I think it's like 60,000 and change. Does that sound right, Mark? I think yeah, 60,000 something.
which is that's a good length. We've had a long, people do write longer ones. Um, like for anyone who's interested, like 100,000 words is a long novel. 200,000 words is a really long novel. And anything above that, you should probably think about dividing that into two books. But
Mhm.
it depends on the author themselves, how long they want their book to go. Some people are really focused on the word count, and some people are just, I want to write a good story. So it depends on the author.
What a challenge in 1 month, 40,000 words. You
Yeah.
know, when you hear the whole novel is 60, I mean, that's wow. And you did it? You did 40,000 in a month?
Yeah, close to. But again, that the idea there is to get something down on the page. And then,
Sure.
it's I won't say it's easy from there, but it's much easier than staring down that blank page. I mean, once you have that raw material to work with, I feel like it helps so much to hammer that out into something finished from there.
I think that's a wonderful idea that month. Maybe we should resurrect it on our own somehow, you
Yeah,
know?
there may be equivalents to that. That organization is has folded, but there are
Hmm.
probably similar challenges out there.
It almost sounds as if that's doing something like that is the plane taxiing from the gate to the runway, and then the takeoff is actually writing the book. What, Eric, what's your advice to somebody who's thinking about writing a book, whether it's fiction, whether it's not, and they don't know where to begin, or they feel that they might not have it in them to do it? What would you tell them?
Well, I think it's pretty common advice, but I would say read a lot. I mean but not only read a lot, but read widely and
Mm.
try to sort of identify your favorite authors and identify what it is in. Don't just read for enjoyment, but try to figure out what it is at the core of those favorite authors and favorite books that appeals to you and what you can, beg, borrow, and steal from that experience. I think another thing is you have to be sort of fearless. I don't think that's in my nature, so maybe that's why this took longer than I would have liked, but it was something I had to overcome. In my case in particular, I was writing about a community in Buffalo, Frank Lloyd Wright community, and I was also writing about my family. And early on, I was like, I'm going to offend a lot of people. I'm going to get in
Mhm.
trouble here. I think I assume that that's an issue for a lot of writers who set out to do anything that's the least bit autobiographical or autobiographically inspired. I don't really know um, how writers write outside of that, like in a completely different world, making characters up that have absolutely nothing to do with themselves or their family or their immediate circle. So I can't offer advice on that. But in my case, I had to sort of decide, well, I'm going to do this, and if anyone's offended, I'll apologize instead of, asking permission.
Final question. 10 years in the making, something you never thought you would do. That's what it sounds like. If you could give 3 words or less to describe how you feel after having this book published, knowing that you accomplished it, what would those 3 or less words be?
Three or less. How long do I have to think about that? Brevity. Let's see. Say that again. 3 words to,
Describe the feeling that you have after publishing this book, 10 years in the making, even thinking that, yeah, I don't know if I could do this and I don't want to offend anybody. And now it's here. Now you look at it, you look back at it, the whole experience. We go 5 or less if you want.
I would say, excitable disbelief.
Love it.
How's that?
Well, you know what? I figured I'd flip the script, if you will, instead of going for 40,000 words. We can pare it down to less. Mark, if somebody's thinking about doing what Eric did, even just pondering it, how does the process work? They reach out to you, go to the website, and what happens there?
Well, as Eric says, the first thing is to try, put pen to paper and see what you can come up with. But when you're ready to publish, website is nfbpublishing.com, and we can help you from there.
Awesome. Mark, Eric, thank you so much for being here today and taking us on this journey. Really appreciate it.
It was great talking with you. Thanks.
Likewise. We'll be right back.
Thank you.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
Hi, this is Terry Crews, actor, former football player, game show host, father of 5, and all-around big dude. I'm also an expert on drama. I know all kinds of drama. There's the good kind that comes with having a house full of kids. There's the bad kind like season-ending injuries. There's the necessary kind like having an agent in Hollywood. And there's silly drama like the drama around my percolating pectorals. And then there's the drama you can skip.
Skip the drama that comes with not having your high school diploma or equivalency. Find free adult education classes near you and finish your high school diploma. Visit finishyourdiploma.org.
Or text diploma to 97779. Message and data rates may apply. Reply STOP to opt out. That's diploma to 97779. And leave the drama to actors like me.
Brought to you by the Dollar General Literacy Foundation and the Ad Council.